Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 00 of IDK, the Identity Knowledge Podcast. My name is Dave, and I'm your host. I really appreciate you guys joining me today, and I'm looking forward to starting up this podcast with you guys. I'm very happy to be involved with this community and to do some things that are not currently being done. And so I'm just really excited to be able to help build a podcast and make it available for some people that can find this material interesting. And I figured that since this is our first episode, maybe the easiest thing to do would be for us to just talk about some things. Talk about a couple of things that I'm sure are burning questions you guys may have, and then we'll kind of go from there. So the first question you might ask me is, Dave, why did you start at episode 00? Everybody knows that you start on episode 01. Not so fast. Remember, this is a podcast for identity professionals, okay? Have you ever been an IT professional and created an array? Well, guess what? It starts at 0, not 1. So that's why we're calling this episode 00. Maybe it's a joke, maybe it's not. I don't know, but I still think it's a great way of starting out. And plus, episode 00 sets a baseline, right? There's no expectations. Nothing has been in that variable yet. It's empty and ready for us to talk. So it makes sense to me to make episode 00. So now let's dive into some of that material. So first of all, a question you may ask me is, what is the purpose of doing this? Is this podcast really necessary? Well, you could argue that it is or isn't necessary, but I'm going to say, yes, it's necessary. But why is that? Well, there's several reasons, but the first reason is that there are simply not enough identity professional podcasts. Now, don't get me wrong. If you go out to your favorite podcast website and look around, or YouTube or something, and look for podcasts related to identity, you will find some out there. Don't get me wrong, there are some. But they're either extremely niche topics, or they don't really talk about identity stuff from a professional's point of view, and in some cases they just don't really have any material anymore. So there was this open space to do some sort of podcast and to do something that would make sense for the world that I find and enjoy. So that's why I wanted to do this. I also have technology equipment that works well. I've done some streaming and some things before. And so I had the equipment. I figure, what could it hurt? I might as well use some of it, get something out there. It gives me the ability to share my knowledge with people, and I can use some of my technology that I've already paid for and I'm using. So that's another reason that I chose to do this particular podcast. But there's some more reasons as well that are altruistic, to be honest, because I really enjoy helping people. If you haven't checked out my resume or my history, you can go check out that information at the About section on our website, which is idkpodcast.tech. That's idkpodcast.tech. You'll see, if you look there, that I have had over 25 years of experience in the world of identity and access management. I started using a wonderful tool, called Novell NetWare. Novell NetWare was Active Directory before Active Directory was cool. And then, lo and behold, at 2000, they opened up Windows Server 2000, which launched, do you know, Active Directory. And if you've worked in IT for any more than 2 seconds, you've probably heard the word Active Directory. It's everywhere. And it is one of the most ubiquitous identity tools, technologies that exist. And I worked with it when it was made. Not kidding. Trying to not age myself, but I've worked with it since it was started. And since then, I just found my way into this huge world of identity. And I have been since pulled into so many other worlds. I have spoken at multiple conferences on different identity topics. I've been the guest at panels for identity conferences and things. I've mentored many professionals in my field to help them become the best identity professionals they can be. This includes people who already know how to do some identity stuff. Maybe they're just trying to improve how they do it in a corporate setting or something. I've also had people that were new to the field. Maybe they ended up accidentally becoming identity professionals by the fact that they were selected to do the single sign-on rollout for their company using Okta or Ping or something, and they really just they didn't have any other direction. And so I've come in and I've helped those people learn and grow. And I enjoy that because I think that knowledge should be shared. I think knowledge, if you have it, should be made available to other people. And I'm not trying to say that I've got some endless well of knowledge. I have a lot of experience in it, but it's not really intended to sound smug. It's more of the fact that I've just been doing it long enough that I've learned some things along the way. I've been able to try different things. I've worked in a lot of different environments and different technologies. I've learned a whole lot. And by making a podcast, I'm able to help people with these things. I'm able to help you guys learn. I'm able to share with you some of the things that I've learned. And I just think that's a really important thing because this field is relatively new. It's only about 10 years old or so, at least as a field. Now, again, identity tools have existed for a very long time. But as someone who's been doing this for a quarter of a century, yeah, I aged myself on that one. But anyway, I've just seen the field really come into its own in starting in the early 2010s and continues to grow and change. And I've just kind of seen that evolve. I've seen the evolution from extending Active Directory to bringing in third-party tools. I saw the rise of giants like SailPoint and Savient. I saw the change from on-premise to cloud-based technologies. And I saw the modifications of moving things to be 100% remote during COVID. I've just seen a lot of these things happen in the identity space. And I still feel like the field is not represented. And if you go out and you search for podcasts on this material, you're just not going to find very many ones that have had that breadth and that amount of experience, I think. So that was another reason that I was motivated to make a podcast like this. I also really like this stuff. It sounds silly and geeky, and I'm okay with that, but I really love identity, and I really love the amounts of cool things you can do with it. I love the just world of identity management that's opened up and the things that have happened as a result of it. And I think it's great to work with other people who do this stuff and help you guys and help myself grow, because I could certainly keep growing for sure. Also, I really have a lot of fun talking. I'm going to be honest about it. I like talking in front of people. I've talked to strangers. In fact, if you meet me in person, probably going to talk to you. I may not talk about identity stuff unless I know that's where you found me from, but I just enjoy talking. And, well, if you're listening to this podcast, you want to listen, or at least are going to try to listen to what I say. And so I figured, why not? Might as well give it the opportunity and try to see what I can come up with. Now, there are some non-altruistic motives for this, I will admit. And, I am a consultant, and I am the leader of a consulting firm for identity management, at least the leader of an identity and access management segment in a firm. And so there is a good potential that perhaps some of you guys may find the material that I've taught you on this podcast to be useful, and you go, man, I really wish that my employer could borrow Dave and use his skills to do this. I wish Dave could just give us his feedback on how I can do this particular thing, or I would love for Dave to help us deploy our new system that we're putting out, or even for Dave to be there and be available to answer questions that we may have. I think that would be fantastic, and I would love that. And so, using my website, there will eventually be a link or a contact form that will give you the ability to reach out to me directly if you would be interested in trying to use my services to help you out. Now, I will admit that the way that my organization is set up, I am focused on a particular customer base, so it's a little bit complicated in trying to get the ability to help people with non-customer based problems. However, I'm working through that, so over time, it should be easy enough for this material to be available and for you guys to be able to reach out to me and to schedule work with me and contacting with me, even if it's just a quick session where you'd like to say, hey, Dave, can we talk? And just, I'd like to ask you a question about this stuff. Yeah, I love my brain being picked for things like that. So yeah, contact me and say, hey, Dave, I just wanted to pick your brain about this particular topic, and we can talk about what that might look like and how that might be something we could earn from an expense. But I want you to understand that this is not designed to make money. I make plenty of money doing the work I do, and I'm not really hurting for that. Sure, every bit of money helps, but it's more of the fact that I just enjoy the material and I want to be able to help others just like me use this material and learn and grow. And I hope that if you've spent time listening to this, that you will take the things that you've learned here and either share it with someone, either giving them a link to the podcast or going out yourself and saying, hey, I saw this guy talk about this. We should try doing something like this. Or maybe you can use it in your organization. Maybe you've been tasked with helping build an identity system or rebuilding an identity system, and you just go, Dave, I don't know what's going on with this, and we can talk about it. And I can say, here's some things that I would suggest, and you can go to your organization and you can do those things. And I even know how to do strange things, like I learned and taught myself how to make a magic quadrant chart. You know, the cool things that you see on Gartner? I can make one of those. So wouldn't it be fun if you could show your employer how to make your own Gartner magic quadrant? Okay, it is trademarked, but an analysis quadro corner report. Sure, let's go with that. No, don't do that. Either way, I've learned ways to represent information that can be sometimes a little bit hard to follow, and especially for non-technical people to understand. I can help give you some advice on how to create nice reports and things like that for it. I may put some of those on the podcast as well, because that's kind of a very important part of this, and that is that I want this to be something that is interactive. I want us to have the ability to interact with each other, and I want this to be a podcast that is empowered by the people who work in our field. So I really want you to hear me talking and to want to be involved. Again, on my website, there is a contact form that you can use. And if you go out there, I would love for you to submit a question or maybe a few questions. You can say, hey, from an identity professional's perspective, how does someone do this? Or how would I go about learning this thing? Or what makes the most sense for a certification, or whatever the case may be? I want you to send me those questions, because I like to dedicate about 10, maybe 15 minutes of my show to answering questions like that. Maybe I'll only answer one question if it's something that I want to go into deep detail on, or maybe if it's a short question that I can answer relatively quickly, I'll do maybe multiple 2-3 questions in a single session. Now, I'm not doing this in a live streaming format, meaning I'm not going to be, live and a chat's going to pop up and I'm going to answer the question. This is not the way that this works. But I will answer the questions as I see them. And if I'm going to talk about it, if you're following my IDK podcast website, or you're following me on LinkedIn or one of the other places, then you'll be able to see what I'm going to talk about on that particular episode. So you can say, hey, Dave is going to talk about that thing I asked. Or if I can, I may send you an email that says, hey, John, you sent me an email that you would like to talk about ways to deal with modern skin changes. And guess what? I'm going to talk about that in episode 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever of the podcast. That'll give you something that you can hop out and look at and read. And that way it's something that helps you grow. And again, I'd like to build a community around this podcast to bring professionals of our space together, to help each other out, to help us learn things, help us work and do important things. And of course, this is going to change over time. The podcast is going to grow, hopefully, and it'll hopefully have a lot of more interesting things. So this really is kind of the reason I wanted to set things up this way. So let me talk about a couple of things just very briefly, sort of, I don't want to say necessarily house rules or anything, but just sort of some overall information. So first of all, I'm planning on doing podcast episodes about once every 2 weeks, at least for now. In fact, at the time that this podcast becomes available, this episode, there should actually be 2 additional episodes out there, because I wanted to start by loading up front a couple of episodes about this material, and then I was going to see how it goes from there. And so that is to say that I will only work about once every 2 weeks on these podcasts. And you might say, okay, Dave, why would you do that? Why are you only going to do once every 2 weeks? Well, that's because I do have a full-time job where I'm working as a lead consultant in a firm. I also am pursuing a doctorate degree that I'm nearing finishing, and I have a family. So I don't just have as much free time as, say, someone who doesn't have all those things. This is not my primary income. This is not my primary job. I'm not a content creator by trade. And so I'm just not going to have time to provide quality material in a more expedient time frame. So we're going to start with once every 2 weeks. And if the podcast really takes off, or if there is some more openings that come up in my time, then I'll do more. But for now, I'm going to stick with doing it once every 2 weeks. Plus, it'll keep me from burning out, and it'll keep you guys from getting tired of listening to me all the time. So another thing I would like to offer is I'd like to offer a more detail about this QA session. I want to make sure you understand we're not going to be using this QA session to bring up questions about, well, what is the better identity platform, or what technologies should I invest in, and things like that. This is more of, hey, I'm an identity professional. This is a problem I'm dealing with, and I'd like some help. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about. And since this is the first ever episode of this podcast, no one has sent me any questions. But luckily, I happen to have a lot of people that I've talked to in our field, and I've been given some really great questions in my lifetime that I've answered, and I've also asked some of my own. And so until we get enough people providing those questions to me, then I'll be pulling out some of the ones that I remember, either answering on some sort of speaking engagement that I did, or something I did in another place talking to a professional in this world. I'll pull those up and talk about them. But if I can talk about questions that you guys want to ask, well, that's obviously my preference. So to set the stage as to what this might look like, I chose an interesting conversation topic for the last part, which again, I do want to focus this on the last part of the podcast. And that question is, unfortunately, this answer is not something that I came up with. I wish I did, but it didn't work that way. But this is an actual thing I had heard in the field whenever I asked a person this question. That question is, what is the strangest or most unusual way that you have seen an identity platform used? What is the most unusual way that happens? And I've got a couple of stories, but this one takes the cake. I was talking to a person who'd been doing this for a while. They'd done some work in the higher education space. And they said, Dave, the weirdest identity and access management connection I've ever worked with was an LPT printer port. That's right. I'm not kidding. An LPT printer port. So if you were born before 2000s, and you've worked in the IT field, you probably know what this is. Otherwise, you may not have the foggiest clue what I'm talking about. But back in the old days, whenever the dinosaurs roamed the earth, there was this large, wide connector known as an LPT. And this LPT was connected to the back of a usually desktop PC and connected usually directly to a large printer. The only way to print things back in those days was to use either an LPT printer port or some sort of complicated print server, and in rare cases, USB whenever it was available. So this LPT port would basically be used to connect through a driver from a computer to a printer to print out whatever code was sent to that printer to provide a source of information. And when you get back into the guts of this, because I did look it up after this happened, thinking I got to know more about this, it does have the ability to send a transmission using essentially ASCII text. And the ASCII text that it sends allows people to have something on the other end that can accept the ASCII text, because that is how a printer works in the old days. So what this person likely did, and I'll have to get more information to be sure, but what they likely did is they set up an ASCII connection, and then they built a connector on the other side in their identity system to read the ASCII text that came in and to have the system process that. I don't know what they were sending with the ASCII text, or I don't know what the LPT printer was being used to send information about, but bar none, that has got to be the strangest identity connection I have ever heard of. So that's just a sample of what I hope that you guys will get to enjoy, questions like that, and I hope that you'll tune back in and learn more about that. But as I've said, I'm trying to keep these things short enough, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this down to a close, trying to keep around 20 minutes. But I wanted to say, please come and join, please get involved, and I really hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope that it will help you in the future. That is all for today's episode of IDK, because now you know. We'll see you next time. Bye.